The morning Allison Carter walked into the glass tower on Madison Street, she carried more than a worn-out resume and a trembling hope. She carried her 3-year-old daughter, Chloe, who clung to her with the quiet, fearful grip of a child who had already seen too much instability. Rain dripped from the ends of Allison's hair as she stepped into the marble lobby, her heart pounding like it was trying to escape her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not with a child in her arms, not with overdue bills in her purse, not with the shattered pieces of her life held together only by determination and thin hope. But sometimes life doesn't wait for the right moment, and this job interview felt like the last thread before everything fell apart. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of the good still left in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these powerful stories reach more hearts. Allison had rehearsed every answer to every expected question on the bus ride downtown, whispering quietly while Chloe slept against her shoulder. She had lost her husband 2 years earlier, and though she never asked for pity, the loneliness of single motherhood often felt like another shadow she had to outrun. She had also lost her previous job when the company folded without warning, leaving her scrambling to choose between childcare, groceries, and rent. But today, she kept telling herself, might be different. Today, she could start again. She just had to survive this one interview. But as she approached the reception desk, Chloe began to stir and fuss, rubbing her tired eyes. Allison's stomach sank. She had prayed her neighbor would watch Chloe, but the sitter had canceled at the last minute. There had been no plan B. She expected the receptionist to frown, to wave her away, to say, "Children aren't allowed during interviews." Instead, the woman gave a sympathetic nod and pointed her toward the elevator that led to the top floor, where the CEO himself was waiting. The CEO. Not a manager, not an assistant, the CEO. Allison's knees felt weak. When she entered the office, she was greeted by a panoramic view of the city stretching out beneath the windows. Behind a sleek desk stood a tall, sharply dressed man in his 40s with warm eyes and an unexpectedly gentle expression. His name was Jonathan Brooks, a name she had seen on business articles and LinkedIn success stories. He was exactly the kind of person she expected to judge her the second he noticed the child at her side, and he noticed immediately. Chloe gripped Allison's leg, watching him with wide, unsure eyes. Allison opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to justify, to shrink, but Jonathan lifted a hand ever so slightly, not in dismissal, but in understanding. Then he did something that made Allison freeze. He stepped out from behind his desk, walked toward the small seating area beside the window, and pulled out the smallest chair from the corner, likely kept for visitors' children, and placed it gently beside the one where Allison would sit. He looked at Chloe with a soft smile, lowered himself slightly to her eye level, and said nothing that needed translation. His kindness spoke for itself. He didn't judge. He didn't question. He simply made space. Allison felt her throat tighten as she sat down, helping Chloe into her little chair. The moment felt surreal, like someone had quietly opened a window in a room she didn't realize had been suffocating her. As the interview began, Allison kept waiting for the shift, the awkwardness, the impatience, any sign that her situation made her less worthy. Instead, Jonathan listened with an attentiveness that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. She told him about her previous work in customer relations, how she managed crisis calls with empathy, how she had once led a team of 10 during a difficult transition period. She spoke of long nights and early mornings, of learning new systems, of doing the job of 3 people when the company began to collapse. But she didn't tell him about the nights she cried quietly so Chloe wouldn't hear. She didn't tell him about the eviction notice she folded inside her purse. She didn't tell him how close she felt to giving up. Still, something in her voice must have carried the truth anyway. Jonathan asked questions thoughtfully, not transactionally. He spoke about how the company was moving toward a more human-centered approach, how leadership meant more than spreadsheets, how the best employees were those who understood compassion. His gaze drifted once toward Chloe, who was swinging her feet quietly and holding a small plush bear. People who know how to care, he said, and Allison felt her breath hitch because she wasn't sure if he meant her or simply the world as it should be. The interview lasted nearly an hour, but it felt like minutes. When it ended, Allison gathered her things, lifting Chloe into her arms. She thanked him sincerely, but also cautiously, because hope was a fragile thing and she had learned not to depend on it too heavily. Before she reached the door, Jonathan spoke again, his voice steady, warm, and life-changing. "Allison," he said, "we'll be in touch very soon." The next morning, while she was preparing a bowl of cereal for Chloe, her phone rang. She almost didn't answer because unknown numbers usually meant overdue notices. But she did, and her legs nearly gave out as Jonathan's assistant delivered the words that felt like sunlight pouring into a dark room. "You got the job. Congratulations." Allison sank into the chair, covering her mouth with her hand as tears filled her eyes. Chloe toddled over, patting her knee with innocent curiosity. In that moment, the weight she had carried for so long began to lift, slowly but unmistakably. That job became the beginning of a new life. Within months, Allison rebuilt her savings, found a more stable apartment, and enrolled Chloe in a preschool she had only dreamed of before. Every time she passed Jonathan in the hallway, he smiled the same genuine smile, never hinting at the impact he had made, never expecting thanks. But Allison knew. She knew that sometimes the world changes not through grand gestures, but through one person choosing compassion when judgment would have been easier. If this story has touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who need them most. Before the ending, I'd love for you to comment below, "Kindness creates miracles." And with that simple truth, Allison carried on, stronger, steadier, and no longer alone, because one CEO had pulled out a chair not just for her child, but for her future.